Why kids can't read anymore. What teachers are seeing. There's been a lot of discussion recently about students struggling with reading, and it's not just a little. In many cases, they're well below where they should be. So, I wanted to look at a few clips and talk through some of the reasons behind it. From what I've seen in the classroom, it's not just one issue, it's a combination of things.
Fourth grader asked their teacher, "Why do I need to learn how to read if AI can read for me?" Right now, 40% of fourth graders can't read. We're witnessing the collapse of the American education system.
This idea is becoming more common. If AI can read and explain things, why do I need to? The problem is, reading isn't just about getting information. It's about how students build vocabulary, focus, and understanding.
I teach 8th grade history, and I have 110-ish students. 2 of them are reading on grade level right now. 18 of them are at a kindergarten level. 55 of those students are between a 2nd and 4th grade level. We were doing guided notes, supposed to be a real easy day. It was review. They wrote down Maryland was founded as a safe haven for Catholics. It was on the board. They wrote it down. And before we moved on, I call on a student and I ask, "Hey, where were the Catholics? One more time." And these students, what they do is they look at me and then they look at their notes and then they look at the board. They look back at their notes. And some of them never answered me. They never figured out the answer. It was wild. And I kept giving them hints, like rephrasing the question and saying, like, "It's in your notes. We just wrote it down. We just wrote it down. Where are the Catholics? It's on the board." And they never got it. They can't read their own notes. And I don't mean their handwriting. I mean, like, they can't make heads or tails of it on the page. These kids have a frightening ability for information to go from their eyes to their hands and not pass through the brain at all. What do we do, y'all? That ship is sailing across the ocean and there is no one at the wheel.
What she described is terrifying. The information goes through their eyes, down through their hands, without passing through their brains. But this isn't an isolated incident. This is nationwide. I looked up the actual numbers. Only 23% of fourth graders can read at a proficient level. Just 23%. Then we have the 8th graders. Only 26% are reading proficiently. After all the reforms, adding technology into the classrooms, and debating about funding, we're now at 40%. We didn't get better, we made it worse.
Hey, just a general question, no shade whatsoever, but like, how old were you when you learned how to read? How old were you when you could pick up a book and just read it? Because I feel like the kids nowadays are a little behind with stuff like that. So tell me why. I was with one of my neighbor's kids and he was playing a game on the Xbox. And I kept on asking him the name of the game and he just was not answering me. And I'm like, "Bro, you picked the name, you picked the game. Like, what did it say?" And he turns and he looks at me, he's like, "Caitlin, I don't know how to read." What? He's almost 7. Y'all don't know, like, what?
7-year-old can't read. This kind of situation usually doesn't come out of nowhere. By that age, students should be able to read simple words. If they can't, it often means they've missed a lot of early practice. If they skip that process, those skills don't really develop. Things like being read to, practicing regularly, engaging with books. Without that, the gap builds pretty quickly.
Apparently, in a lot of school systems, teachers are being told to specifically teach excerpts, not entire texts. Even in my high school AP English classes, we used excerpts, but it was only in very specific scenarios. And now, high schoolers are graduating high school having never fully read an entire book, and they're going into these college spaces having to take freshman, sophomore level English courses, and professors are noticing that they are not able to digest whole texts. This scares me for 2 reasons. 1, we are entering a time where a lot of children are being raised by parents who have never read a book. The amount of adults that I speak to and interact with, not only on TikTok, but also like in real life, that don't read on a regular basis, that don't give a fuck about reading, and they are raising children. Number 2, if school systems continue to prioritize prioritize teaching excerpts and not whole books, we are going to enter a literacy crisis that has never before been seen. And to think that not even in schools, children are not being forced, for lack of a better word, to interact with a text from the first page to the last is terrifying.
This is something that changed over time. Students are often reading shorter texts instead of full books. The downside is that they don't build stamina. They're not used to reading for longer periods or following complex ideas over time. So even if they read, longer texts feel overwhelming. Let's look at some of the comments. I teach high school English. We still do full books. Every single parent-teacher conference, I have multiple parents telling me it's an unfair expectation. It's one book per quarter and they're seniors. Unfair? A generation will be left behind. I read more required books in middle school than I did in my last couple of years of high school. I don't think I read a single full book after COVID. That's scary.
A university English professor is terrified by the sharp decline she's seeing among her students, and she says it's the worst she's ever encountered. There's been a lot of talk recently about what seems to be a pretty shocking level to understand why they get bad grades, and she's definitely not alone. Journalist Rose Horowitz recently went viral with her article in The Atlantic titled "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books." Keyword elite. The profs Horowitz spoke to all work at highly selective institutions like Columbia, Stanford, the University of Chicago, who all say that just reading, let alone understanding, a full-length book is beyond many of their students' grasp. And we're not talking obscure esoteric literature here. Columbia professor Andrea Delbanco told Horowitz that he's had to omit Moby Dick, a book previous generations would have encountered in high school, from his Herman Melville unit to focus on short stories like Billy Budd for Topman instead. I mean, for what it's worth, I went to a full-tilt party school and I read Billy Budd for Topman in 11th grade honors English. So what's going on here? Well, many educators blame 2000s era educational policy like George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind, and the Common Core standards meant to address its requirements. No Child Left Behind, or Nickelby as it was known to teachers, focused very heavily on standardized testing, a feature Obama's subsequent replacement legislation mostly retained. And when it came to English skills, these tests focused on short, often non-fiction passages. And since Nickelby punished teachers in schools for poor performance on these tests, teachers had no choice but to prioritize shorter, more informational passages in order to teach to the test, as the saying goes. But teaching to the test is not education, it's just teaching a kid how to pass a test. Being able to tackle a short nonfiction passage is an entirely different set of skills than being able to read and digest an entire novel with all its nuances. Pair that with the way technology has affected all of our attention spans, and well, here we are, with tons of students, not all before you kick off in the comments, but a lot, who literally don't know how to sit down and just read and understand a book. And a lot of you are probably saying, so what? But reading books is one of the key ways we first encounter the wider world with all its nuances and contrasts to our own lives. In short, reading and the humanities in general are how we first learn empathy. Where do we go from here? Other than better educational policy, that is? Well, it's hard to say. But encouraging a love of reading in kids by reading to them from the very beginning of their lives, as frankly was standard parenting practice until like iPads came along, seems like a good place to start. Because it's really starting to seem like our future might actually depend on it.
When this shows up at university level, it's a sign of a bigger issue. Students have often been moved through the system without fully developing reading skills. There's also been a strong focus on testing, which doesn't always prioritize deep reading. By the time they reach higher education, it's much harder to fix. Let's take a look at some of the comments. I was a college bookstore manager for a while. The novels they read were on 6th grade reading level, and students still struggled.
Yeah, it takes a village, but don't blame them when your child's illiterate. Dude, that mom on here talking about how her child has a phone and can only send voice notes on it because that child is incapable of reading or writing. And she exclusively blames the schools for this. There's no accountability in the video as to how this is partially her fault. There are lots of, I think, valid thoughts and takes coming from that video, but here's one that I want to give. There is zero justification for a child of parents with adequate means to resources to be illiterate in 2025. And I know that's going to sound harsh and unempathetic of people's struggles, but I'm not saying that you have to do it all alone. People are tired, overwhelmed, but outside resources exist. And I'm telling you, growing up, we did not have a lot of means financially, but the best place that we went every summer was the free library summer education program. We got out of the house. It was completely free and inexpensive. It was, I mean, like the value of books. I know for a fact that there are kids that aren't getting that kind of like valuable experience. We know that because we hear librarians talking about all the time, but people just like aren't utilizing these community programs. And when you don't utilize community programs, funding gets cut for them. But also we know that because these kids aren't reading. These kids aren't reading. If you aren't building out a world for them in which reading is a fun, valuable, and important part of their lives, of course they're not going to read. Of course they're just going to send voice memos.
Technology plays a role too. If students can't avoid reading or writing by using voice messages, they often will. It's more convenient, but it also reduces how much they practice those skills. And over time, that makes a difference. Let's take a look at some of the comments. Parents are the primary educator. When your kid has a phone but not a library card. Library cards are free. Cuba's literacy rate is 100%. Reading-orientated family habits like reading stories at bedtime is vital. It's a low-effort way to expose children to language. So why are students struggling with reading? It's usually not one single cause. It's a mix of habits at home, changes in school systems, technology, and gaps that build up over time. I'm interested to hear your perspective. What do you think is the biggest reason students struggle with reading today? Leave a comment below, and if you found this useful, feel free to like and subscribe.